One thing all of us have in common is that we want to be happy. And that's why we're going to go over 5 habits that you can implement that will make you happier. So the first habit of happy people is that they often enter a flow state. And the reason why this flow state makes us feel so good is that when we enter flow state, all 5 feel-good chemicals are released at once. And this is the only situation in which this actually happens. And those feel-good hormones would be norepinephrine, dopamine, endorphins, anandamide, and serotonin. Another reason why flow feels so good is that when we are in a state of flow, we are in a state of hypofrontality, which basically means that our prefrontal cortex, this brain region up here for decision making, is shut down. And the reason why this makes us feel happier is that the prefrontal cortex is there for thinking. And therefore, this is also the brain region that is activated when we overthink, when we feel depressed or anxious. Back in the days when they did lobotomies, the reason why they did lobotomies was because they noticed that if they got rid of the prefrontal cortex, then these patients would be less depressed and not anxious anymore. Even though, of course, this is a bad idea because the prefrontal cortex is extremely important for future planning. And our prefrontal cortex is also our inner critic. Whereas flow makes us happy because it puts us in the present and it silences our inner critic. It is a state of selflessness in which we're so engaged with what we're doing at the moment that we haven't got enough time to actually think about ourselves. And the second tip, it's extremely important for happiness to have good relationships. There was a study that started in 1938 and it's still being continued that tracked the lives of many people to find out what made them the happiest. They did this by interviewing them in their homes, examining medical records, looking at brain scans, and it turned out that those who were lonely, they were unhealthier, they lived a shorter life, and in general, they felt unhappier. In fact, relationships actually protect your brain. They also found that those who were in the happiest relationships, their memory was the best when they were in their old age. And then the third habit would be altruism. There was a study in which participants got exactly the same amount of money. And these participants were split into 2 groups. One group was instructed to spend it on themselves, whereas the other group was instructed to spend it on someone else. And it turned out that only those who spent that money on someone else actually had an increase of overall happiness. And then the fourth tip would be exercise. Before, when we were talking about flow, I mentioned 5 chemicals, and one of those feel-good hormones was anandamides. And these are also released when we exercise. And what these anandamides do is that they lower stress-induced anxiety. And they also lower pain and depression in general. What also happens due to exercise is that BDNF levels increase. And amongst depressed people, BDNF levels are way lower than people who are not depressed. And exercise also lowers depressive-like behaviour. And then the 5th tip would be to become a satisficer, not a maximizer. So what this basically means is that maximizers, when it comes to choosing options, maximizers are those who are always seeking the absolute best option, whereas satisficers are those who just are happy with options if they're already just good enough. They don't have to be the absolute best. And because maximizers always want to make sure that they get the best option, they feel way more regret after choosing an option as soon as they find out that there's a better option out there. And on top of that, also when they don't necessarily know that there's a better option out there, they're always thinking, well, maybe there is something better out there. Maximizers also have to deal with a lot more decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is basically when we are confronted by so many options that we feel totally drained of our energy, because the prefrontal cortex is the brain region that is there for decision making, and it expends loads of energy. And the reason why maximizers suffer more from decision fatigue is that satisficers, once they've chosen an option, they don't think about it again. They're happy if they're more likely to be happy with their option. Whereas maximizers are always thinking about maybe there's something out there. Their decision, even though they've already decided, isn't quite done yet, because they're always thinking about maybe there's something better out there. Now, if you're interested in knowing more about why having more options actually makes you unhappier, then you can watch this video here.